Well, hello, creatives, community, kind folks out there. Uh, I gotta say, I'm sorry about yesterday. Uh, I I was knocked the hell out. I just I slept through probably 5 alarms or something. So yeah, yeah, we're live. Woo! Yeah, so sorry about yesterday. Um, Although I used to say these were demi-daily just so I have an excuse for possibly not showing up. So I'm really sorry. I I just had a busy weekend, and then man, the next day, even my wife was like poking me in the side, like, shouldn't you be up? And I'm like, whatever. um Ricker says, if it makes you feel better, I almost did the same thing yesterday. Oh man, it's we're going through a little bit of a seasonal change here, so we're really diving deep into our springtime. So yeah, it felt pretty cool. Had the window open, had a nice little breeze. So okay, all right. Sorry about that. Enough about that. All right, so this week we will be doing maybe I'll do one Saturday, 5 of the Game of Thrones characters. That's what we're doing. Doing TV to RPG. We know that Game of Thrones is coming up on its last. Yeah, yeah. Rickard says just one more snooze, one more. I think it was like 5 or something. I barely registered it. I barely did. It's crazy. But anyway, so we're coming up to the beginning of the last season of Game of Thrones. I believe there will only be 6 episodes that rounds out the season. Everyone's predicting how many and which of their characters will die first, what have you. So of course, yeah, Ricker says, "Oh, it's always one more, even if you say it 20 times." Yeah, it's the same thing with food for me too. I'll just take one more bite. But so I thought today we would do, not just today, but to round out this week, we'll do some of the major characters, and we're basically going to do the Lannisters this week with Daenerys. So today we're going to do Cersei Lannister. We're gonna put in Jamie and Tywin, and end it Friday with Daenerys. Daenerys Stormborn, Daenerys Targaryen, and all of her extra titles and whatnot. But today, Cersei Lannister. Cersei. Okay, so for those who aren't maybe don't watch the show or aren't interested or really can't keep up with the names, Cersei Lannister is the Queen Mother. She is a woman from the Lannister family, and the Lannisters are these blonde-headed, um, beautiful, handsome, rich, uh, privileged in the Westerosi sense of having it all. Well spoken, well groomed, intelligent, and they really know how to play the Game of Thrones. Sorry, there's going to be a sneeze coming up. So Cersei herself, for for the general public, has kind of in sat in the background quite a bit. Um, when it comes to politics, her father, Tywin, pretty much dominated that family, and her brother Jamie is this like golden god of a knight, a swordsman, and so she has kind of sat in the background. But those of us that know her, Yurka says, I always got a feeling she felt entitled to more. The world will give me what I'm due. Uh, Not just her. I think all of them. Are you kidding me? Hell yeah. Everyone says siblings. Yes. Now, mind you, rumor has it, and I'm talking from an outsider, right? Somebody from the flea bottom. We all had rumors that her and her brother Jamie had a very intimate relationship, and her children, all blonde haired, were not from the king, but were actually spawned from her and her love of or desire for and abuse of her husband. I mean, her brother. Sheesh. So yes. Is there major incest? Yeah, there's incest sprinkled in this show. And so along with her feeling like Rickard says, entitled, that the world will give me what I'm due, she's pretty much lived her life that way. So what can we take from this character? Well, part of me thinks that her storyline has a lot to do with the things that are taken away from her, and the things that she felt were due, that were hers to keep, and one by one went away. So one of the things are um, her children, and the her children and the prophecy that kind of motivated her actions. Yeah, Ricker says, hell, she just uh she just wants to carry on the Targaryen ways. Yeah, 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 the Mad Queen, right? Of course. All right, so where can we like rip this apart a little bit? I want to say that there is a story um based on where you come from. You may have heard the story come from different ways, in which an individual who's gaining power goes to an oracle, and the oracle basically, this rich and powerful person says, "Oracle, tell me my future." And Rickard says, "Kitten, give me attention, human." Yeah, I have a kitty right here next to me who has a strong desire for her attention. So Cersei goes to essentially Cersei goes to an oracle, and the oracle and asks the oracle, "Tell me my future." Now, of course, someone who is this arrogant and thinks the world revolves around them thinks the oracle's going to tell them everything they want to hear. And long story short, the story is that an oracle tells this person the good part. You know what? You're going to rule the world. And then the bad part is everything that you create is going to then destroy you. So how does this person react to it? Well, they create a self-fulfilled prophecy. And Cersei kind of created her own self-fulfilled downfall by her actions and the things that slowly were taken away one by one. So go back to chat. Cersei is amazing to watch when she's gunning for power. She already has power. She's written poorly and doesn't know what to do. She knows how to play people, connive, backstab better than most. And hell yeah. And in many ways, her story arc was kind of hidden in a background of other people. And I think we can learn a little bit of that for creating, especially an NPC or an adversary, because most of our attention, despite the fact she plays the Game of Thrones excellently, but for the most part, her brother and her father, and even Tyrion, her two brothers and her father kind of took center stage from her, and she was just the culture of this world, basically put her in the back, in the background, not realizing that she was the evil and despicable person that would rise to power and do what she did, essentially, burning down the Temple of the Seven and whatnot. Yeah. Now, Deadman brings up her and her son. I want to bring to light something, and I want to relate this to her name. So in I believe it's Greek or Roman mythology, there was a person named Cersei, not spelled the same way her name is, but pronounced the same way. And she lived on an island, and travelers, I think it was Odysseus and his crew, ended up on her island, and she could charm men and turn them into little animals and stuff. Yeah, Zevron says spells this Greek Cersei. Yes. And for me, I think we could pull from Cersei both in Game of Thrones as a Cersei on the island that turned the men into animals, because you could claim that her children are the same way. Yeah, I'm not certain how to exactly spell it, and I'm sure there are variations thereof. Rickard says, we talked about it during Tywin, but this is also someone who wants power but have no plans what to do with it. She just wants it, and in many ways, you could claim that her, like you mentioned with Tywin, right? Like we never knew what his ultimate plan was, and maybe we never knew what her ultimate plan was until everyone above her kind of got out the way. And, maybe now she just wants total domination. And I get that's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but I would go about this differently and make her someone that slowly starts to turn into a big adversary for your game as each of her pets are taken away from her. So, for example, when Joffrey hurt one of her sons, who's a complete sociopath and psychopath and just, sadistic and brutal and whatnot, becomes king. We see what happens when when the world's controlled by one of her sons. Of course, it's one of the few shows where we root for a child being murdered, and we're just like we're like fist pumping, like yes, finally. And then she has her second child becomes king, Tommen, who's completely useless. He's just, he's basically the epitome of a child. He's very impressionable, shouldn't be king in the first place. And what happens? She feels he's taken away from her. It was her fault. We know that it was her fault. But again, one of her children goes, and then Jaime, her own brother, who she's addicted to and wants to keep and keep for herself, he goes away as well. So, and then we have her daughter, who ends up being poisoned and murdered by foreign agents and whatnot. So I think as each one was taken away, her rise in power and her motivation for ruthlessness increased as well. Rickard says Tywin felt like someone who would have a plan. Cersei feels more like someone who just wants the whole world to bend the knee to her. I absolutely agree. Even though we never really found out what Tywin's true plan was. I just felt like he was better at building the bricks. You know what I mean? He tied things together with a very long plan. And for her, I absolutely agree. She's someone, it displayed in the show, she's someone who really wanted to make sure people knew that she had the power. Like what was that whole scene where she says power is power? She tells the guard, so grab him, cut his throat. No, wait, don't do that. Oh, you know what I mean? It was crazy, but she proved her point. And I think with Cersei, if you want to use her as an NPC or as an adversary, having this person in the background and having her agenda, having the things, her privileges chipped away at a little bit at a time, would make a more compelling story, especially if she's and it doesn't, of course, it's not gender specific, but if she's someone sitting in the background, and let's say as a symbol of power, she has like a tiger from the Southlands and a polar bear from the Northlands or something, and she's kind of surrounded herself with these little images or trinkets of the conquests of her and her family, and then having little things represent the loss of power and influence, and having her become more ruthless as the power's taken away. Maybe the animals die, or her link, the influence she has over these other realms starts to fray. The king is killed or dies or gets sick or is away from, is on a major battle that takes place over 6 months, and she's in control. And then slowly you see that she's not quite in control as she should be, and then starts becoming more ruthless to the people in the city and to her so-called allies and enemies and things like that. Rickard says, how about this? Cersei, more than any other Lannisters, is trapped in the shadow of Tywin. She thinks of herself as perfect as he was, but she lacks the greater perspective of her father. And I cannot agree more. I mean, having an adversary that doesn't, they don't need to be perfect. So the elimination, let's say you have yourself a standard game where you have the evil king, like a Tywin, and he's dispatched and he's cast aside. And we have this, the daughter of this king. Maybe the PCs never even thought of her as a threat, and she comes to power, but her limitation is she really doesn't have the foresight. She doesn't. Maybe she's been able to surround herself with people who were able to keep her in power, but we see from her actions that she really doesn't have the foresight to really rule a kingdom in the long term. She's really using just intimidation. It's really intimidation, right? The mountain, this undead giant of a man that hangs around her, and I cannot remember the name of the gentleman that was cast out of the Maesters group, who is her alchemist slash necromancer or something, and designer of weapons and whatnot, who controls also her spy network. I mean, like Rickard says, she's good at tactics, but doesn't have a mind for strategy, if that makes sense. I absolutely agree with you. She's getting along by winning the battles, but she's not necessarily winning the war, right? She's very good at displays of power, crushing someone's skull, having people murdered in the streets, blowing up the sept, the things like that. And I think that would actually be pretty cool in a dynamic setting where the players, it's not just necessarily the players against the queen or the queen mother at this time, but she's also taking out her rage on the local divinity, the churches. She's, setting them on fire, blowing them up. Maybe she's marching the, members of the criminal organizations out in the public and having them executed in the square and whatnot. And she's like throwing a monkey wrench into the status quo, where even the PC that's the paladin, ends up getting a message from the local thieves guild. The thieves guild's like, listen, we don't necessarily agree on stuff, but she's crazy, right? It's like we may be at odds, and we might be criminals, we might be pickpockets, and we're doing bribery and racketeering and prostitution and stuff, but we're not marching people out in the street and executing innocent people, right? Like, we all need to stick together to take her down. And that could be an interesting dichotomy, having the so-called lawful and good elements of the city teaming up with the more chaotic and selfish members of the city, because everyone's banding together to take down this one individual. Zevron says, my idea could be, as a villain, she is a determined usurper. She is slaying her way up the line of succession, making alliances or deposing people of power through diplomacy every step of the way. But once she gets that power, she becomes paranoid, power hungry, and has no idea what to do with it. She has no goals, so she has nothing to plan for. You know what? I love that idea, because we often, what's the typical bad guy motivation? I want power, ultimate power, right? And then what happens when you get it, right? What happens when this individual, like you say, they lie and cheat and backstab and assassinate and destroy and battle their way to the top, and then when they get there, they look around at the king of the castle. They're sitting at the top of the hill, and it's like, now what? Comic books are notorious for doing that, where the bad guy wants to mind control the entire population of the world. And then once they get it, it's like, now what? But what a great story, though. A person who could may have been your fifth or sixth or seventh tier big bad evil guy in your setting, and then little by little they've been eliminating the next one and the next one, and even with the help of the player characters, right? The player characters are going after, I'm just making example, like they take down the dragon, or in one, to the east, they take down the lich to the west, and they take down the goblinoid hordes to the north and whatnot. They take down the Rakshasa to the south, and each person that gets eliminated allows her to move up one further step along the way. She's, of course, backstabbing, cheating, all that kind of stuff. And then when she finally gets to the top and is sitting on the pile of dead and of death and destruction, maybe she doesn't know what to do. And maybe that makes someone more dangerous because they're not predictable. So, but yeah, I mean, a great story. I'm telling you guys, you can absolutely steal these ideas. Zevron says maybe the position they take is as much religious as political. A god king or queen, like a pharaoh. Maybe she aspires to be divinity, but because the rightful heir is alive, she doesn't claim the power. I could see that. I mean, especially like you mentioned, like a pharaoh, where the political spectrum is tied intrinsically to a religious spectrum as well, where you have this person who believes they deserve to be have divine power, or will attain it if they reach to it, or like